Picture this. October the 6th, 1955, the Paris Motor Show. Visitors expecting the usual chrome-laden, tail-finned offerings of the era suddenly find themselves staring at something that looks like it dropped straight from the year 2000. Within 15 minutes, 743 orders. By day's end, 12,000. This wasn't just a successful car launch, it was automotive hysteria. The Citroen DS didn't just raise the bar, it launched the bar into orbit. Now, you remember 1955. Europe was still picking up the pieces from the war. France's roads were barely roads at all, granite slabs that could rattle your fillings loose. American cars dominated with their power and flash, while most European manufacturers played it safe with incremental improvements to proven designs. Into this landscape, Citroën dropped a bomb disguised as a family car. The DS, pronounced DS in French, which sounds like déesse, meaning goddess, spent 18 years in secret development. 18 years, that's longer than most marriages last these days. And what emerged was a vehicle so radical, so thoroughly engineered, that even today's cars are still catching up to some of its innovations. Now, you probably know the DS changed things, but the specifics, the engineering details that made mechanics scratch their heads and competitors tear their hair out. That's what we're diving into today, because this wasn't just about pretty lines and French flair. This was about rethinking what an automobile could be from the ground up. Fact 1. The most successful motor show launch in 60 years. Let me paint you the full picture of that October day in 1955, because the numbers tell only part of the story. 743 orders in the first 15 minutes, 12,000 by the end of day 1. By the time the show closed its doors 10 days later, Citroën had accumulated 80,000 deposits. Think about that, 80,000 people willing to put money down on a car they'd barely seen from a company that had never built anything remotely like it. That record stood for over 6 decades. The only vehicle to surpass it? The Tesla Model 3, in March 2016, with 180,000 first-day deposits. But here's the kicker. In 1955, those orders came by telephone or in person. An army of clerks sat with typewriters, manually processing each one. No internet, no online configurators, just people so blown away by what they saw that they immediately opened their wallets. The DS cost 65% more than the traction Avant it replaced, a significant premium in a country still recovering economically from World War II. In 1955, the DS carried a price tag of 930,000 old French francs, equivalent to about 1,400 euros in today's currency. To put that in perspective, the minimum monthly wage at the time was 21,839 old francs, meaning the car cost about 43 months' salary for a minimum wage worker. Yet they still lined up. Why? Because nothing, and I mean nothing, on the road looked or performed like this. Fact 2. Hydropneumatic suspension, the magic carpet ride. Now we get to the heart of what made the DS revolutionary. Forget the pretty bodywork for a moment. The real genius lived underneath, in a system that threw out 100 years of suspension design and started fresh. The system used an engine-driven pump that pressurized a closed hydraulic system to 17.2 megapascals. That's 2,490 pounds per square inch. Each wheel connected to a sphere filled with nitrogen gas on top and hydraulic fluid below, separated by a flexible membrane. When you hit a bump, the fluid compressed the nitrogen, which acted as your spring. Simple in concept, revolutionary in execution. But here's where it gets interesting. This system allowed automatic leveling and variable ground clearance. The car would maintain its ride height whether empty or loaded with 5 passengers and luggage. You could adjust the height anywhere from 9 to 28 centimeters with a lever in the cabin. Need to change a flat tire? Raise the car to maximum height. No jack required, driving fast on the highway, lower it for better aerodynamics and stability. The ride quality? Automotive journalists struggled to describe it. They settled on magic carpet. You floated over France's terrible post-war roads, while passengers in the back sipped coffee without spilling a drop. Paul Maguez, a Citroen employee with no formal engineering qualifications, developed the concept during World War II. His innovation became so successful that Rolls-Royce licensed the technology from Citroen in 1965 for the Silver Shadow. The system proved brilliant in motorsport too. The DS won the Monte Carlo Rally in 1959 and again in 1966, beating the supposedly unbeatable Mini Cooper. Why? Because while other cars bounced and skittered over rough surfaces, the DS just glided. Fact 3. First mass production car with disc brakes. Here's something that might surprise you. Although disc brakes had been tried on a car as early as 1902 by British manufacturer Lanchester, and volume production was attempted without success by American manufacturer Crossley in 1949, the Citroen DS was the first successful fielding of disc brakes on a mass-produced car. The timing matters. While Jaguar was proving disc brakes in racing, winning Le Mans in 1953 with them, Citroen committed to putting them on every single DS as standard equipment, not optional, not on high-performance models only, standard. The Triumph TR3 gets mentioned sometimes as a competitor for this title. But here's the thing. While Triumph announced the TR3 in October 1955 and began experimenting with disc brakes at that year's Le Mans, the first TR3s equipped with disc brakes didn't hit the production line until September 1956. Citroen was already building and delivering cars with disc brakes by then. The DS used inboard front disc brakes mounted next to the differential rather than at the wheels. This reduced unsprung weight, the weight that the suspension has to control, which improved ride quality and handling. The braking system integrated with the same hydraulic system that powered everything else, providing consistent, powerful stopping with a pedal that felt more like an on-off switch than the progressive action you were used to. 50 years before the Mercedes SLR had the same thing, the DS featured this ultra-sensitive brake pedal that required drivers to adjust their technique. But once you mastered it, the braking performance was extraordinary for its era. Fact 4. A single pump powered everything. Let's talk about what might be the DS's most audacious feature, its central hydraulic system. In conventional cars, hydraulics powered brakes and maybe power steering. The DS? It went all in. A belt-driven pump, similar in size to a power steering pump, generated high pressure when the engine ran. This single pump powered the suspension, brakes, power steering, clutch, and transmission. Think about that engineering philosophy. Instead of separate systems with separate failure points, Citroen centralized everything. Brilliant or insane? Depending on who you ask, maybe both. The semi-automatic transmission deserves special mention. You still shifted gears manually, but the hydraulic system eliminated the clutch pedal entirely. Move the shift lever, and hydraulics engaged the clutch and selected the gear. It made city driving far less fatiguing than constantly working a heavy clutch pedal. This integration had another benefit. The systems could work together. When you braked hard, the hydraulic system automatically adjusted suspension firmness. When you loaded the car, it leveled itself. These weren't separate features, they were a unified system working in concert. Of course, this centralization had a downside. If the hydraulic pump failed, you lost nearly everything at once. The cheaper 1957 ID19 had manual steering and a simplified power braking system precisely because Citroen recognized not everyone wanted to bet everything on hydraulics. The ID gave buyers the space-age looks with more conventional mechanicals underneath. Fact 5. Directional headlights. Decades ahead, the 1967 Series 3 introduced directional headlights to automotive mass production. These weren't the modern adaptive LED systems we have now, but the concept was identical. The inner headlights physically turned with your steering wheel to illuminate corners before you reached them. This feature came standard, not as an expensive option on luxury models, standard equipment on the DS. While it sounds simple, the engineering challenge was significant. The headlights had to be sealed, yet capable of movement, connected mechanically to the steering system, properly aimed, and reliable over thousands of cycles. The 1967 facelift also moved to a distinctive glass cover over all four headlights, giving the DS its iconic frog eye appearance. American regulations wouldn't allow the directional feature, so US market cars received a different setup with four exposed headlights. But in Europe, this innovation made night driving on twisty roads dramatically safer. It would take decades for other manufacturers to adopt similar technology. The Audi A8 didn't get adaptive headlights until much later, showing just how far ahead Citroën was thinking. Fact 6. The assassination attempt that proved the engineering. August 22, 1962. President Charles de Gaulle and his wife rode in their black Citroën DS from the Élysée Palace to Orly Airport. As the motorcade sped down the Avenue de la Libération at 70 miles per hour, 12 gunmen from the OAS, the secret army organization, opened fire. 140 bullets, 2 motorcycle bodyguards killed, the DS's rear window shattered, and all 4 tires punctured. After the attempt, 14 bullet holes were found in the president's vehicle, one of which barely missed the president's head. Here's where the engineering mattered. Despite running on 4 flat tires, despite the damage, the DS's driver maintained control and accelerated to safety. The hydropneumatic suspension kept the car level and stable, even with destroyed tires. A conventional car would have been uncontrollable. De Gaulle reportedly commented on the attacker's marksmanship, or lack thereof. But privately, he acknowledged how close it had been. In 1969, de Gaulle attempted to prevent the outright sale of Citroën to Italian automaker Fiat by limiting the stake Fiat could buy to 15%. He knew he owed his life to that car. The event inspired Frederick Forsyth's novel, The Day of the Jackal, later adapted into film. The DS became forever associated with that moment, automotive engineering that quite literally saved a president's life. Fact 7. Aeronautical engineering applied to automobiles. The aeronautical engineer André Lefebvre designed the car using all his skills and knowledge from the air industry to make it as aerodynamic as possible. This wasn't just about looks. Lefebvre understood that reducing drag meant better fuel economy, higher top speeds, and improved stability. The DS's coefficient of drag was exceptional for 1955. No traditional radiator grille disrupted the smooth nose. The underbody was completely flat. The roofline sloped gracefully into the rear. Italian sculptor Flaminio Bertoni handled the styling, but Lefebvre ensured every curve served a functional purpose. All body panels, including the door panels and the roof, could be removed for painting. This modular construction made repairs easier and allowed for color changes without extensive disassembly. The fiberglass roof reduced weight at the highest point of the car, lowering the center of gravity and reducing weight transfer during cornering. The front engine, front-wheel drive layout was another aeronautical decision. Citroën installed the engine behind the front axle with the gearbox placed in front of it, leading to better weight distribution and a longer wheelbase. This created a completely flat floor inside, no transmission tunnel, with room for 3 adults in the rear seat without complaints. Fact 8. Production numbers that shocked everyone. Citroën built 1,455,746 examples over 20 years. Of these, 1,330,755 were manufactured at Citroën's main Paris Quai de Javel production plant, now called K. André Citroën. But here's the surprising part. Production for the year in 1955 totaled just 175 cars. That massive order backlog from the motor show took time to fulfill. Citroën was ramping up production of the most complex car they'd ever built, with suppliers learning to make components that had never existed before. Peak production year was 1970, 15 years into the model's run. The DS maintained strong sales throughout its life, proving that its radical design aged remarkably well. Compare this to most cars which peak in their first or second year and decline thereafter. The model came in numerous variants: sedan, wagon, called Safari or Break, convertible, ambulance and commercial versions. Only 1,365 convertibles were sold, built by coach builder Henri Chaperon with reinforced frames. These rare convertibles now command prices approaching $300,000 at auction. The last DS came off the production line on April 24, 1975. Citroën built up approximately 8 months of inventory of the estate wagon version to continue sales until autumn 1975, when the estate version of the CX would be introduced. Fact 9. The engine was always the weak link. Here's the uncomfortable truth every DS enthusiast knows: the engine never matched the chassis. The original 1911 cubic centimeter engine featured hemispherical combustion chambers and produced 75 horsepower at 4,500 revolutions per minute. 75 horsepower in a car weighing 1,170 kilograms. That's not exactly thrilling. The engine was derived from the traction Avant, with a 3-bearing crankshaft, a design dating back decades. For a car so advanced in every other respect, this power plant felt decidedly ordinary. The reason? French tax law. As with all French cars, the DS design was affected by the tax horsepower system, which effectively mandated very small engines. Citroën had planned an air-cooled flat six for the car, but couldn't afford to develop it, so they made do with derivatives of their old 4-cylinder. Later models got better. The DS21, introduced in 1965, featured a 2,175 cubic centimeter engine with 109 horsepower. The final DS23 displaced 2,347 cubic centimeters with up to 141 horsepower with fuel injection. But even then, the engines never felt adequate. The DS succeeded despite its engines, not because of them. On rough roads or in rallying, where sustained speeds on poor surfaces mattered more than raw power, the DS dominated. In straight-line acceleration or highway passing, less impressive. Fact 10. The hydraulic fluid problem nearly killed it. Early DS owners discovered a nasty problem. The original hydraulic fluid was hygroscopic. It absorbed water from the air. Brake fluid had this same property, with the idea being that within a closed hydraulic circuit, these properties would ensure pockets of non-soluble water wouldn't form and cause corrosion. But the DS wasn't a simple brake circuit. The design of the DS's hydraulic system used much more fluid and allowed much more moist air into the system than a simple hydraulic braking circuit. The reservoir level fluctuated dramatically as the suspension extended to maximum height and the 6 accumulators filled with fluid. Every time the system inhaled fresh air, that air brought moisture, which the fluid absorbed. Result? Corrosion, expensive maintenance, failed components. In damp climates, DS ownership could become a nightmare of deteriorating hydraulic parts. The original vegetable-based fluid, called LHV, and its synthetic replacement LHS, both shared this hygroscopic problem. Mineral-based LHM fluid was designed to remedy these issues, but Citroën was obligated to demonstrate the new fluid was safe for automotive use before it could be installed in American market cars. It took NHTSA until January 1969 to approve it. This meant roughly half the 1969 model year US cars used the older red LHS fluid, while later cars got the superior green LHM. LHM solved the problem completely. It didn't absorb moisture, lasted far longer, and was less harsh on seals and components. Cars converted to LHM became dramatically more reliable. But that early reputation for hydraulic headaches stuck with the DS, particularly in markets where mechanics didn't understand the system. Fact 11. North American sales were disappointing. The DS was sold in North America from 1956 to 1972, but it never achieved the popularity it enjoyed in France. Approximately 38,000 units were sold in the North American market during those years, a tiny fraction of total production. Why the failure? Several reasons. The car lacked an automatic transmission, power windows, and air conditioning, features Americans increasingly expected. The engine felt underwhelming compared to Detroit's V8s, the price was steep, and parts and service were scarce outside major cities. American regulations also hampered the DS. Those beautiful directional headlights? Not legal in the US. The ultra-sensitive brake pedal? American drivers found it unnerving rather than sophisticated. The hydraulic complexity? Good luck finding a mechanic outside a Citroen dealership who could work on it. The original list price for a 1959 ID19 was $2,833. That's equivalent to about $30,500 in 2024 money. Premium territory for what most Americans saw as an unusual small car with a weak engine. Sales were slightly better in Canada, but even there the DS remained a curiosity rather than a serious competitor. The DS succeeded brilliantly in markets where narrow roads, high fuel prices, and sophisticated suspensions mattered. America in the 1960s, that wasn't the DS's natural habitat. Fact 12. Rally success nobody saw coming. The DS won the Monte Carlo Rally in both 1959 and 1966. Think about that. A luxury executive sedan with a modest four-cylinder engine beating purpose-built rally machines on ice, snow, and treacherous mountain roads. How? The hydropneumatic suspension. The system proved beneficial in racing because the DS could drive fast over uneven ground, with the racing experience being comfortable. While competitors bounced and skittered over rough surfaces, losing traction and control, the DS's suspension kept all four wheels planted. In 1962, Pauli Toivonen drove a DS19 to victory in the 1000 Lakes Rally. The DS competed successfully in rallying throughout almost its entire 20-year production run, achieving multiple major victories as early as 1959 and as late as 1974. Long-distance events particularly suited the DS. In the 1970s, the DS was one of only 5 cars that finished the London-Sahara-Munich World Cup, and it won that race. Crossing the Sahara in the 1970s meant endless rough tracks, extreme temperatures, and no support network. The DS's combination of durability, ground clearance, and superb suspension made it nearly unbeatable in these conditions. The 1966 Monte Carlo victory caused controversy. The DS won after the disqualification of the BMC Mini Cooper team. But whether you count that win or not, the DS's rally record speaks to engineering excellence that transcended its original purpose as a luxury cruiser. Fact 13, it changed Citroën forever, for better and worse. The DS caused such a huge sensation that Citroën was apprehensive that future models would not be of the same bold standard. No clean sheet new models were introduced from 1955 to 1970. Read that again. For 15 years, Citroën introduced no truly new models. They'd set the bar so impossibly high that they became paralyzed, fearing anything less revolutionary would disappoint. Throughout the late 1950s and 1960s, Citroën developed many new vehicles for the very large, profitable market segments between the 2CV and the DS, but none made it into production. This left a massive gap in Citroën's lineup, the most profitable segment of the European market, occupied by competitors like the Peugeot 403, Renault 16, and Ford Cortina. Citroën was owned by Michelin from 1934 to 1974 as a sort of research laboratory, so such broad experimentation was possible. Michelin got powerful advertising for their radial tyres, but Citroën's market share suffered. The CX, introduced in 1974 to replace the DS, carried impossible expectations. It had to be as revolutionary as the DS while appealing to modern buyers. It succeeded technically but never captured hearts the way the DS did. The DS came in third in the 1999 Car of the Century competition, recognizing the world's most influential auto designs. Winner and second place went to the Ford Model T and the Mini. Today, the DS's legacy lives in every car with adaptive suspension, every vehicle with sophisticated electronic controls, every advanced braking system. Citroën showed what was possible when engineers were allowed to think beyond convention. Some of those innovations took decades to become mainstream. Others, like the hydropneumatic suspension, remain unique even now. 13 facts about a car that, 70 years later, still looks and feels like it's from the future. The Citroën DS wasn't just a great car, it was a declaration that automobiles could be fundamentally better if someone had the courage to rethink everything. From that first day at the Paris Motor Show, with crowds mobbing the stand and orders flooding in, to President de Gaulle escaping assassins on 4 flat tires, to victories in the world's toughest rallies, the DS proved that radical engineering works, not on paper, not in theory, in the real world under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Yes, it had flaws. The engines were underwhelming, the early hydraulic fluid caused headaches, American buyers never warmed to it, but those flaws seem minor compared to what the DS achieved, redefining what a car could be, setting standards that took competitors decades to match, and creating an icon that still captures imaginations today. I'd love to hear your DS stories. Did you ever ride in one, drive one? Maybe your grandfather had one, or you remember seeing them on the streets. What was your experience? Drop a comment below and share your memories. If you're new here and enjoyed this dive into automotive history, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We've got plenty more deep dives into cars that change the game. And if you learned something today, if I managed to surprise you with a fact you didn't know about the DS, give us a thumbs up. It helps more people discover these stories about the cars that shaped our world. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep the rubber side down and the shiny side up.